Commander Raktar Pivo stood motionless before the massive holographic display, his 4 arms crossed tightly across his exoskeletal chest plate. The luminescent mapping of the planet they called Terran Sphere rotated slowly before him, its blue-green surface mocking him with its deceptive beauty. "You expect me to believe," Raktar said, his voice carrying that distinctive gravelly tone that had made junior officers tremble for decades, "that this mud ball is worth sending 5,000 of our finest warriors?" High General Dorn Nexus, whose scales had long ago faded from vibrant purple to a dull lavender, tapped a long claw against the control panel. "The scans don't lie, Commander. This planet has more accessible water than our entire home system combined. The mineral deposits alone could fuel our expansion for 3 centuries. And the inhabitants?" Raktar raised an eyebrow ridge, the bony protrusion glinting under the chamber lights. "Primitive bipeds. Pre-interstellar. They call themselves humans. Hardly a concern for our military." The general waved dismissively. "Though I must note their world is unusually hostile. Their atmosphere contains corrosive oxygen at levels that would require our troops to wear protective suits. Their gravity is 1.3 times our standard. And they have these seasonal weather patterns that are quite violent." Lieutenant Bella Corva, Raktar's most trusted intelligence officer, stepped forward. "Sir, if I may. Our preliminary analysis suggests these humans are surprisingly adaptable. They've survived in environments ranging from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. They've developed rudimentary nuclear technology in just a few centuries after discovering basic electricity. All the more reason to act quickly, before they become a genuine threat," snapped General Nexus. Raktar sighed deeply, a sound like stones grinding together. "The Council has already decided, hasn't it? I'm merely being informed, not consulted." Nexus had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Your objections have been noted, Commander. But yes, the invasion force launches in 3 cycles. You'll command the flagship, the Glorious Conquest." 2 days later, Raktar addressed his assembled captains in the launch bay. "I know many of you share my concerns about this mission. But orders are orders. 20 ships, 5,000 warriors. We go in fast, establish dominance, and secure the primary resource centers. Minimal indigenous casualties, I want to be clear on that point." Captain Marlowe Zet raised a tentacle. "Sir, what if these humans resist more strongly than anticipated?" Raktar laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Then we adjust accordingly. But between you and me, how bad could it be? It's just one primitive planet against the might of the Veridian Alliance." As the massive invasion fleet departed the space station, Raktar couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. Something about this mission felt wrong. He would later recall that moment as the last time he felt anything resembling confidence. 12 hours after entering Earth's atmosphere, the first distress signal came through. Then another. And another. "Commander." Lieutenant Corva's voice was tight with panic. "We've lost contact with Beta Squadron." "What do you mean, lost contact?" Raktar demanded, but before she could answer, the ship rocked violently. "They're using our own deflector shields against us," screamed the weapons officer. "How do they even know how our technology works?" Raktar gripped his command chair as alarms blared throughout the Glorious Conquest. "All ships, emergency protocols. Fall back to," the transmission cut off abruptly as something impossibly fast and bright streaked toward the flagship's bridge, #Part 2, the catastrophe, 19 ships. Gone. Just. Gone. The words hung in the air of the Veridian High Command Center like a toxic gas. Admiral Jackson Parr, whose distinguished career spanned 3 galactic conflicts, looked as though he might vomit. "How is this possible?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The tactical display showed nothing but static where the invasion fleet should have been. Only one blinking light remained, the venerable, the fleet's medical and scientific vessel that had been positioned at the rear. "Playing the distress signal again, sir," said the communications officer, her voice quavering. The scratchy transmission filled the command center. "This is Captain Grell of the Venerable. They're everywhere. The humans knew we were coming. They have weapons we've never seen before. The glorious conquest is. Oh gods, they're boarding us now. They're in the ventilation system." The transmission deteriorated into screams and what sounded disturbingly like laughter. Commander Raktar Pivo, who had been recalled to high command just hours before the fleet's departure due to administrative concerns, a politically polite way of removing a vocal critic, stepped forward. "Admiral, I request permission to lead a rescue operation immediately." Admiral Parr's eyes narrowed. "With what ships, Commander?" "We've committed nearly 30% of our navy to this operation. The prototype stealth vessel, the Phantom Whisper. It's small, fast, and virtually undetectable. We can be in and out before these humans even know we're there." 48 hours later, Raktar stood on the Phantom Whisper's bridge, staring in disbelief at the debris field that greeted them at the edge of Earth's gravity well. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, and shattered weapons floated in a macabre orbital dance. "Life signs?" Raktar asked, his voice barely audible. "One, sir," replied the sensor officer. "Faint. Coming from what appears to be an escape pod drifting near what's left of the Venerable." When they brought the pod aboard, the medical team had to cut through the twisted hatch. Inside, curled into a fetal position, they found a single survivor, Lieutenant Tila Mori, the Venerable's communications specialist. Her scales had turned from their normal iridescent blue to a sickly gray. One of her sensory tendrils was missing entirely. When Raktar approached, she shrieked and scuttled backward until she hit the wall of the medical bay. "Lieutenant Mori," Raktar said softly, dropping to one knee to appear less threatening. "You're safe now. You're among friends." Tila's eyes, all 6 of them, darted frantically around the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse, as if she'd been screaming for days. "No one is safe. They let me go. They let me go." She grabbed Raktar's uniform with surprising strength. "Don't you understand? They chose me as the messenger." "What happened down there, Lieutenant?" Raktar asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Tila laughed, a broken sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone in the medical bay. "They were waiting for us, Commander. 5,000 warriors against one planet. And they thought it was fun." Part 3, the survivors tail back at Veridian High Command. Tila Mori sat in the debriefing chamber, a thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the room's carefully regulated temperature. The military council leaned forward in their seats, hanging on her every word. "We thought their technology was primitive," Tila said, her voice steadier now but still haunted. "That was our first mistake. They don't build like we do. Their tech isn't sleek or standardized. It's messy, improvised, effective." She took a shuddering breath. "When our first wave landed, they didn't even use military weapons at first. They turned their civilian tools against us. Do you know what a microwave is? It's a food heating device. They modified thousands of them into radiation emitters that fried our neural nets. Their transport vehicles? They rammed them into our landing craft at full speed, drivers jumping out at the last second, laughing." Admiral Parr exchanged troubled glances with his staff. "Laughing? They call it having fun," Tila said, spitting the foreign phrase like a curse. When Captain Drell's team breached their defense perimeter, the humans started playing loud music. Not tactical communications, music with pounding rhythms. They were dancing between shots. Dancing One human killed 3 of our elite warriors with a primitive projectile weapon in one hand and a beverage container in the other. Raktar frowned. But our intelligence indicated their weapons were no match for our armor. Their standard weapons, sure, Tila nodded. So they stopped using standard weapons. They threw containers of caustic cleaning chemicals. They lured our troops into ambushes using recordings of their young. They even used their primitive communications network to coordinate globally within minutes. She paused, visibly trembling. But the worst part? The psychological warfare. They kept taking trophies from our dead. Making jokes. Broadcasting them on their information networks. It became some kind of competition. Who could destroy more of our ships, who could capture more of our technology? Tila's eyes unfocused, seeing something far away. When they captured the Venerable, their soldiers were literally drawing straws to see who got to board us. Like it was a prize. How did you escape? General Nexus asked quietly. I didn't, Tila whispered. They put me in an escape pod. Their leader, a female they called Admiral Kingston, looked right at me with those strange human eyes and said, "Tell your people we kept 19 ships as souvenirs. The 20th is our message." Tila hugged herself tightly. They launched my pod and made me watch. Ship after ship, they didn't just destroy them. They disassembled them. Studied them. As I drifted away, I could hear their communications. They were sharing research findings, making jokes, planning reverse engineering projects. 5,000 warriors, 20 ships, all gone in under 30 Earth hours. And the message? Admiral Parr asked, his voice barely audible. Tila looked up, all 6 eyes wide with lingering terror. They said, "Next time, don't start with an invasion. It hurts our feelings." Part 4. The aftermath of Veridian High Council Chamber had never been so silent. 12 of the most powerful beings in the Alliance sat frozen in their ornate chairs, staring at Commander Raktar Pivo as if he'd grown a second head. This report must be exaggerated, Supreme Counselor Banto Vel finally said, his dorsal spines flaring with agitation. No single species could defeat our most advanced battle fleet in a matter of hours. Lieutenant Mori's psychological evaluation shows no signs of deception or delusion, Raktar replied firmly. And the debris field confirms her account. Our fleet is gone, Counselor. Perhaps the lieutenant's trauma has, began Military Director Pala Thax. A junior communications officer burst into the chamber, violating at least 7 protocols. Forgive the intrusion, but we've received a transmission. From Earth. The massive display screen flickered to life, showing a human female in what appeared to be a formal uniform. Her skin was dark, her hair pulled back tightly. "Greetings, Veridian Alliance," she said, smiling pleasantly as if discussing weather rather than interspecies warfare. "Admiral Kingston here. I trust your survivor delivered our message, but in case something was lost in translation, let me be clear. We've analyzed your technology, learned your language, and now understand your resource needs. We're willing to establish diplomatic relations and discuss fair trade agreements." Her smile vanished, replaced by a steel-eyed stare that made several counselors flinch visibly. "Next time, just ask nicely. We're actually quite friendly when not being invaded." The transmission ended. Chaos erupted in the council chamber. "They've stolen our technology," shouted one counselor. "We should assemble a larger fleet," cried another. "Are you insane?" Raktar's voice cut through the din. They decimated 5,000 warriors using modified food heating devices. Imagine what they could do with our actual weapons technology. The arguing continued for hours until Raktar slammed all 4 fists onto the central table. "Enough. I volunteer to lead a diplomatic mission. 1 ship. Unarmed. If they wanted us dead, they would have followed Tila's escape pod home." 3 weeks later, Raktar found himself sharing what humans called coffee with Admiral Kingston in an orbital station above Earth. The bitter liquid burned his throat, but he drank it anyway. It seemed important somehow. "So," Kingston said casually, "we've prepared a trade proposal. Water and minerals in exchange for cultural exchange and some technological consultation." "Cultural exchange?" Raktar asked warily. Kingston grinned. "Your lieutenant mentioned you found our concept of having fun disturbing. We think that's the perfect place to start understanding each other." 6 months later, Raktar stood before the High Council again, defending the most unusual trade agreement in Alliance history. "Yes, we're exchanging combat instructors," he explained to the bewildered counselors. "They're teaching our troops something called paintball while learning our tactical meditation. Their entertainment broadcasts are enormously popular among our younger generations, and they've become addicted to our ceremonial cuisine." Later, watching human and Veridian children playing together in the newly established Earth Embassy garden, Raktar shook his head in wonder. "I still don't understand them," he confessed to Tila, now serving as cultural attaché. "The same species that turned kitchen appliances into weapons of war is now hosting interspecies baking competitions." Tila's scales had regained their healthy blue sheen. "That's the thing about humans, Commander. They're equally passionate about fighting and friendship. Thank the stars they preferred the latter in the end." "Indeed," Raktar muttered, wincing as a human child shrieked with laughter. "Their capacity for both is terrifying."